Vegas Nation is sponsored by Station Casinos STN Sports. Download the app today and get a bonus up to $100 when you sign up.
You're listening to Vegas Nation. Time to get it started with First and 10 with Vinny Bonsignore and Sam Gordon.
What is good, Raider Nation? Welcome back to Vegas Nation. First and 10, your weekly go-to for Raider news and analysis. As you can see, I got my great friend and colleague here at the Las Vegas Review-Journal and Vegas Nation, Sam Gordon. But before we get to Sam, and probably a little Josh Jacobs talk maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're coming up to the witching hour with him.
We certainly are, Vinny.
And, there's options out there, maybe some real, some unrealistic. We're going to get into all of that. But first of all, I want to remind you that all of Vegas Nation podcasts, including First and 10, are presented by Station Casinos STN Sports and brought to you by Blue Wire and the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Sam Gordon, first and foremost, and to Larry Muir, our great producer, and everyone else that was part of what can only be described as just first-class, excellent coverage of the Golden Knights Stanley Cup run. Kudos to you and everybody. And you're going to be today. You're going to be the face of that coverage.
I appreciate you, man.
Because you were front and center. So, real quick, and I've covered championship teams. I covered many Laker teams. Covered Rams team that went to the Super Bowl, didn't quite win it. But I've been part of coverage teams, and it's exhilarating. It's exhausting. It's fulfilling. It's kind of like the highest level of what you aspire to do in this business. But what were snapshots of covering something so meaningful and impactful, especially here in Las Vegas?
Well, first and foremost, Vinny, the atmosphere at T-Mobile Arena. I mean, this is one of the best atmospheres I've been in any kind of sport in my career up to this point. It's incredible. It's an incredible, the electricity and just seeing the absolute highest level, the highest stakes, is incredible. Again, you can't duplicate that kind of intensity. You can't. It's something that only gets brought out because of the stakes are what they were. So that being said, really cool to see the way sports can galvanize a city, a community, and that's what the Golden Knights have done since day one, since they got here, and it was all kind of a full circle moment, right? Bill Foley, Cup and 6. Obviously, the prediction came true, and what I think really was highlighted throughout the course of Stanley Cup playoffs, and especially in the championship, is just, again, the love, the genuine love and connection of what the Golden Knights mean to this community. That was all on display throughout the course of the playoffs. And then on Saturday at the championship parade, just an unbelievable event for Las Vegas, event for the Golden Knights, event for the city.
Right. You circle it back to the Raiders, and, there's probably, depending on where your vantage point is, it might seem like a long ways off for that to happen, for them to get to the pinnacle of the NFL, which obviously is the Super Bowl. But as the Golden Knights showed, there's no jurisdicting how long it might take or how long it might not take. You put the right pieces together and catch lightning in a bottle. Anything is possible. So we don't know when it's going to happen for the Raiders. We don't know if it's ever going to happen for the Raiders. But if it did, do you feel like the Raiders can be a galvanizing force here in Las Vegas, much like the Golden Knights were?
If they win, if you build
would that same type of ride happen with the Raiders?
I think it would. I think it would, and I think that's what it comes down to is winning, right? If you build it, they will come, and it's no secret. The first few years here in Las Vegas, ups and downs. We've seen, I think, at various junctures how electric Allegiant Stadium can be with Raider fans.
Yep. And
we've seen other times where it feels like there's hardly any Raider fans there.
Right.
So it's about building a consistent winner. That's what the Knights have done. That's the standard that they've set. They're a first-class organization. They've been aggressive at the right times. They've also been patient at the right times. Lo and behold, you have a Stanley Cup championship. But as far as it pertains to the Raiders, the NFL team here was good. I mean, it would add, I think, a whole nother level to what the fabric of this sporting city has already become.
Right, and it's interesting, and we're definitely continue to get on the Raiders. But there's news that the A's are coming now. Another team that is coming from elsewhere, trying to kind of get into the bloodstream here in Las Vegas and create their niche and their fan base. Not quite sure exactly how that's going to go. It remains to be seen. I think there is an appetite for baseball and obviously the major leagues here in Las Vegas, but to what extent, that'll be interesting to see. And then very soon after that, I'm predicting 2027, 2028, the NBA will be here.
Yep.
And that will be a team, much like the Golden Knights, who are born here.
Yep.
And I think that does make a little bit of a difference. And I'm curious, do you think that there's a ceiling to all this? Like where this area is just oversaturated with, which is ironic to even contemplate, thinking about just 8 years ago.
Yeah.
The thought of one sports team, professional sports team in here was bordering on ludicrous. And now we're literally talking about, are they going a little bit too fast, too soon, too far?
I mean, it is happening. It is happening quickly. There's no denying that, how rapid kind of this ascent has been. But there's a reason for it. There's definitely a reason for it. It's such a unique market. It's a transient market. It's so accessible in so many different ways. And the infrastructure here with the hotels, with the convention space and all that, it supports big events and sports. Sports fall under the big events umbrella. So I don't know. It's a great question. I think we'll get a better feel for that as time goes on, as we learn more about what happens, what the next steps are with the A's, what the next steps are with NBA expansion. But the appetite for sports, I think, for professional sports here is as robust as it's ever been. I think the Golden Knights reflect that, and kind of we'll see what the next steps are.
And I think the spirit here in Las Vegas, somebody described it to me. We may have talked about this last week. I don't remember, but no isn't in the vocabulary here. Mark Davis, the Raiders owner, told me that the difference between what he was dealing with in California compared to here in Las Vegas is it might be difficult. That idea might be audacious and ambitious and difficult to get to, but nobody ever says no. It's like, okay, how do we figure this out? And the saying that I've heard is, yes is the answer. What's your question? Which is a great way to look. Now, you wrote some articles being critical of the A's, and I was with you in the context of how much is the state willing to give. There was probably a number there that you would have been comfortable with, and I think the state leaders did a pretty good job of driving that number down from what it was originally. And I know that taxpayer money. Anytime you talk about that. It's an emotional issue for a lot of people. But I also get the investment end of it. Anything in life, whether you're talking about, no matter what it is that you're doing, what cities are trying to do all the time when they give tax breaks to industries to come here, you're investing in them, hoping that you end up reaping the benefits through jobs, tax revenue, and all that kind of stuff, that it ultimately pays off for you. Do you feel like, and I know that, again, I was with you on some of your columns being critical of it, do you think that this has a chance to work out, not just for the A's, which I think it could if they do the right thing, but for the state itself?
I mean, yeah. I mean, eventually, I do think. I think right now, like you said, Vinny, it's an emotional conversation. It's emotional time. I'm still not in support of public, necessarily public funding, bringing the A's here, and especially given their track record in particular. Right. But if things change, and depending on what happens, again, we've seen the appetite for sports here. We know in terms of Major League Baseball, this is a city with a rich history of Major League Baseball, not with a team, but so many great players historically, past and present, have come from Las Vegas, right?
Absolutely.
So there is an emotional connection, I think, with Las Vegas and baseball. How will that play out with the A's? We'll have to see in time.
They're going to have to do their part.
They're going to have to, right? Absolutely. And based on what we've seen so far, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Right.
But if it does, if they actually step up to the table and invest, then maybe you have a product this city's proud of.
Putting myself in like Governor Lombardo's shoes, my message to the owner was I would have sat myself in a room with him. John Fisher is the owner, and said, look, I'm not going to stick my neck out to the extent that I am, and he did, without some assurances that when you get here, you start acting like a big league team, and you start investing in this team as if you're a big league city, because this is a big league city. And don't just be a taker when you get here and then reap all the benefits and not reinvest into your product to give Las Vegas and Nevada a team that they're proud to call their own.
That's a prerequisite. I mean, I think that's right? You have to. That's an absolute prerequisite. I'm skeptical because of his track record in Oakland. But, again, look, if things change and if he invests in this team and if the team, again, if it's a winner, if it's a sustainable winner, then regardless of what it took to get the team here, I do think Vegas will eventually come around. Whether I agree with it or not, I think that's the reality of the situation. So we'll see how it plays out.
Speaking of making an investment, the Raiders have a running back in Josh Jacobs, who I sincerely believe they want to invest in for the long term. To what extent long term and running back coexist, I don't know like how many years that would represent. But I do think that they sincerely want to invest in Josh Jacobs on the long term. But I think it's getting clearer by the day that their idea of what number makes sense and represents fair value is different from what Josh Jacobs and his camp feels represents fair value, right? And we saw a tweet on Tuesday from Josh Jacobs, and I don't want to misquote him, but I think he said bad business.
We'll double check.
Poor business. We're going to get to that, but it was bad business. Yeah,
there you have it.
It was 2 words, bad business, and unless Josh was in line at Chipotle and they didn't hook him up with enough steak when he asked for extra steak, which has happened before, by the way. Maybe he was having a day like that where it just didn't work out someplace, and that's what he was talking about with bad business. Short of that, I think it's safe to assume that the tweet, it was in reference to the impasse between he and the Raiders and what we just talked about in terms of value. First and foremost, Josh, obviously, probably, if we're reading the tweet correctly anyway, expressing a little bit of frustration on how things are going.
Absolutely. And from his perspective, I get it.
Yeah,
I mean, he just won the rushing title. There's an understanding, and I think, Vinny, the referendum on the running back position, right? This isn't just the 2023 thing. It's been the last 10, 15 years.
Or a Raiders thing necessarily.
Or a Raiders thing. This is around the NFL. And I think it's a super fascinating and interesting topic because the way that the game has evolved, right, in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, who you had, your running game, specifically your running back, helped drive winning in a way where it just doesn't have the same effect anymore. It's more about your running game as an operation now in 2023 as opposed to who the actual individual is.
Right.
That being said, Josh Jacobs is phenomenal. Like, why, if you're him and you're his representation and you know 3-4 years maybe, right? You can't take anytime for granted, especially at that position in the NFL in general. If you're him, you're trying to get every dollar you can.
Yeah.
If you're the Raiders, understanding kind of the point I just made that we've seen teams have really effective running games with 4th-round picks, 5th-round picks, rookie running backs, plugging guys in,
I can't even tell you where the Eagles led the league in rushing last year, right?
Yeah. Helped
that their quarterback probably had about 700 or so yards, was their second leading rusher. I can't tell you where their running back was drafted.
Not
a first-round pick.
You can manufacture a running game now by investing in your offensive line, scheme.
Multiple running backs.
That's the reality of the situation, and that's what we've seen some of the best teams in the NFL do. So from the Raiders' perspective, it makes sense, right? They don't want to necessarily invest long-term in the running back position, and Josh Jacobs has earned big money, top dollar, based on his performance. So it's two sides that, I mean, it's understandable why we're at this point, and it's understandable why each party feels the way they do. Now it's about how do you rectify this.
Right, and there's a July 17th deadline, which is less than 3 weeks away now.
We're taping this on 11 a.m. on Wednesday, June 21st, so we're right around the corner.
Right, exactly. Less than 4 weeks away. Less than a month away. If you were to ask me right now, do I think they get something done? No, I don't think. I think it's a long shot at this point. So that leads, to okay. Then what happens? All right, what happens? And just to back up a second, the Raiders have designated their franchise tag to Josh Jacobs. That comes at a value of $10.09 million. So that's what the Raiders would be paying Josh Jacobs, fully guaranteed money. $10.09 million. The caveat to that is Josh hasn't signed the tag yet, or the tender yet. So he's technically he's not under contract with the Raiders. They're still trying to work out a deal. They have until July 17th. That's the deadline under the franchise tag rule, which if you don't get something done long term by July 17th, then the player is obligated. The only option is there's two options. One, play under the franchise tag, or B, don't play at all. So we'll get into what the likelihood of either one of those two options for Josh Jacobs. I am seeing, this is that weird time of year where people are writing a bunch of stuff and saying a bunch of stuff that doesn't necessarily have much merit or make a lot of sense. But we'll go through, for sake of argument, some of those type deals. One is the Raiders could trade Josh Jacobs. All right, so could it happen? Sure, anything could happen. But what would that represent? Number one, it would represent a team saying, we're going to give the Raiders fair value in draft pick compensation, or I guess you could say a player too, but let's just say draft pick compensation for Josh Jacobs, and then on top of that, they're going to have to then do what the Raiders haven't been able to do, which is sign Josh Jacobs, because why would he go anywhere else under the same terms or the same thing? It's unlikely that, number one, a team's going to meet whatever the Raiders designate as fair value for them, because if Josh plays this year under the tag and then leaves next year as a free agent in March, they're going to get probably, let's say, a fourth-round pick compensation. So that's their starting point. Nothing below that, and probably nothing even the equivalent of that, because that pick is down the road somewhere.
Right.
They have Josh Jacobs right now, and they have his production right now. He means more to them on the team,
1,000%,
than he does off. So a trade could happen, but the only way it could happen is if somebody blows their socks off and then decides that they're going to sign Josh Jacobs to a long-term deal, which, from another team's perspective, why does that make sense when there's Dalvin Cook for just money right now?
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott is a free agent right now. Kareem Hunt is a free agent right now. So if there's a running back needy team out there, why don't they first look there before ever considering trading for somebody who they're going to have to give up a draft pick asset or a player and then
sign the max dollars or a premium extension, right? So it's really a unique situation. Is there a precedent? I mean, Le'Veon Bell a few years ago,
a bad precedent,
and it did not work out for him. I mean, he goes on to New York.
He went on a journey. It was like
sat out a year, went on to New York, and was never the same player again. Now, did he get taken care of to a certain point? Sure, but it cut his NFL. He was in a situation in Pittsburgh where he was the best running back in the NFL at that time, and it all wrapped quickly. And I guess that's kind of the point of wanting long-term dollars, because you never know when it's going to go at that position.
Well, and the scenario that Sam just presented represented an option that does exist for Josh Jacobs, and that is sitting out all of 2023. Is that Le'Veon sat out the entire season?
I believe, sat out the 2018 season.
So, that's money that he'll never get back. I don't care what he ended up making with the Jets. He still lost a full year's guaranteed salary in 2018, which there's no way to account for that moving forward. So he lost that money and then was never the same after that anyway. And I have to go back and look to see exactly what he signed for, but it probably wasn't worth it in the long run. So if you're asking, could Josh Jacobs sit out in protest this year? Again, it's possible, but is it likely? Is it probable, considering it's $10.09 million this year? Yeah. If I'm Josh Jacobs and it comes to that, I would imagine that the best scenario for him at that point is just get your money, play ball out this year, and then you could always revisit it with the Raiders again at the end of next year. And try to come to terms on a new deal, or just leave as a free agent to the team of your liking for the money that satisfies you. That seems more likely, right? Than sitting out?
I would say so. I mean, look, I don't know we haven't talked to Josh Jacobs in quite some time. I think when we last talked to him at the Pro Bowl, there was an understanding that that we might get to this point. He was definitely made it clear that the franchise tag was not something he wanted to play under, but here we are now in June, and the situation hasn't really changed. If anything, right, based on that tweet, it seems like it's a little bit more tenuous. So it's I think kind of one of the main things looming over this Raider team right now. We know what he meant to that offense last season. Sure, it was a 6-11 team. It didn't make the playoffs, but can you imagine if he didn't rush for 1,600 yards?
No doubt.
Like, where would you be?
Do you think, if you're the Raiders, do you think you're better off getting less, and I don't. I'll ask the question.
Yeah.
Do you think you're better off as an offense actually getting less than that from Josh Jacobs with the potential that you're going to make it up in other areas to maybe actually improve your offense a little bit.
I mean, a little bit more balance, a little bit. You want to have a better passing game. I mean, that's just the passing game. The Raiders' passing game underachieved last year. Yeah, it just is what it is. Devontae Adams didn't underachieve.
No,
but pretty much everybody else that was part of the passing game, save for the offensive line, which I thought held up pretty well.
Right.
The unit wasn't what you thought it could be. So if you get some balance and have a more explosive passing game, then you're going to have a better offense.
Right. And also, you as an organization, a coaching staff, you might accept less production from Josh Jacobs himself.
Yeah.
Which also, by way of maybe reducing his usage, which, by the way, I think you may have written a column about it at some point last year, or we may have been talking about that. Is this the best way to use Josh Jacobs? Like, you're literally, like, he had over 300 carries.
Yeah, it was a big workload.
It was a little too much. Like, I felt like that's probably too much. It worked for last year. He stayed healthy, miraculously so, and he was extremely durable, and I give him all the credit in the world for that. But is that sustainable to run him that many times when maybe you can offset it a little bit with a Zamir White or a Britton Brown?
Yeah, I mean, it's never bad to have depth. And even if you do bring Josh Jacobs back, like, again, that was a huge workload. That's a workload we don't necessarily see the modern running back have anymore.
I would have never thought in a million
Derrick
years,
Henry,
going into last year,
that he was going to be almost a 1,700-yard guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was an unbelievable. It was one of the greatest single seasons in Raiders franchise history from an individual player. So with that being said, it's totally understandable that, hey, look, if I'm him, I want my money too.
Yeah, and what's so weird about that situation is that everything right now through analytics and studies and people that are way smarter than me and you, maybe not you, but definitely me.
Don't sell yourself.
Are basically saying it's not a good idea to pay a running back on a second contract big money. It just there's a breaking point there, and when I would imagine that every good business out there, forget sports, but everybody bases something on analytics and information and data and all. That's where we're a data-driven society, and when the data says don't do something, is a good business to go against what those statistics and analytics are saying.
Well, to get to your point, you talk about a couple of running backs, you mentioned them earlier, that got long-term deals.
Right.
Free agents now. Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott. They were paid extremely handsomely. How did that work out for the respective teams? Not bad, but not necessarily great. Right? Derrick Henry, another long-term contract. It looks like he's, towards the end of his prime. You don't want to put anything past King Henry, but look, he's going to be 30 by next postseason and still owed a lot of money. Christian McCaffrey, the Panthers gave him that contract and then traded him expeditiously. So you see some, regret maybe from some of these. I don't know if that's the right term because, again, these players are all very productive. I think specifically with the Titans, their structure is around their running game maybe more than Minnesota's or Dallas's was with Ezekiel Elliott or even Carolina's once Christian McCaffrey went down. But what do you have to necessarily show for it, right?
I was just going to say that, like, all those teams that you just mentioned, short of now the Niners with McCaffrey, and I think we'll see what happens with their quarterback situation, but I think they're kind of built to win. But if you go back to his Carolina days, and you go back to Ezekiel and the Cowboys, you go back to the Titans and Derrick Henry, and we might be missing even Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, I mean,
not even close to sniffing a Super Bowl.
Right.
For any of those teams. I know that the Titans ended up going to the AFC Championship game one year.
Yeah.
But it was a surprise.
It was very, the Titans are very unique, and that's just kind of.
Is a running back going to lead you to the promised land?
In 2023, it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened in, I don't know, since when? The 90s, the 80s? Right. I mean, it's been a long time. The game's changed. The game has evolved.
Do you remember who the Chiefs running back was when they won the Super Bowl, their first Super Bowl? Damian Williams, right?
Yeah.
Last year was Pacheco.
Yeah.
A 7th round pick.
Yep. You can if it's more about, again, no disrespect to the great running backs of the game, but it's more about the unit as a whole now as opposed to the individual player, which sucks for running backs because you grow up being a running back and you get to this point where you're Josh Jacobs, you have this amazing year, you want to cash in for it, and this is the situation you're in. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I get the side of the player, I get the side of the franchise, and lo and behold, this is the byproduct.
You know what the shortest shelf life positions are? The two positions that have the shortest shelf life in football?
Go on.
Running back, linebacker. Especially that inside linebacker.
You're hitting every play.
Sometimes against each other.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like whether you're tackling the running back or taking him on as a blocker, it's just a very violent physical sport. And, people can make the argument, well, offensive linemen and defensive linemen get hit every day, which is true. But that's more hand-to-hand combat.
These aren't the collisions.
It's not the running,
like that,
and just bang, like you just said, those types of collisions. So it makes sense that those two positions are the shortest shelf life, and then also those two positions we're starting to see, definitely with running back, and I think with especially those inside linebackers. Look at the guys that are not getting their fifth-year option picked up for this year. There's a handful of them are inside linebackers that just teams are like, we're not going to give you that second.
That's it's the running back
contract.
in the defense now, where you can find value at that position and get production.
It's just a hard one, and I know some people say, well, it's owner-driven. I don't think owners care, honestly, who gets the money. They write a check. They say, okay. Every year, it's 49% of revenue goes to the players. That's what shapes your salary cap.
Yep.
I think owners are telling their general managers, look, I'm basically giving you got $237 million to spend. You spend it how you think we need to spend it as a team. It's not owners trying to pocket more money or anything like that. They're writing this. It's the distribution,
trying to put together the best football team possible
of that salary cap money, and it's a difficult one. And I think it's fair to feel for Josh Jacobs coming off the year that he's coming off.
No doubt.
But again, kind of a rock and a hard place due to the position that he plays and how that position is valued monetarily. All right, so we just talked about how we're about 4 weeks away from training camp. Believe it or not, it's going to be here before we know it. This is a time of year that coaches and teams kind of hate because you say goodbye to the guys and you just hope that every one of them shows up with no issues.
Top condition.
You know what can happen? Yeah, conditioning, anything can happen between now and training camp. So every team kind of holds their breath a little bit to make sure everybody stays safe and sound and out of trouble. Frankly, let's be honest about it. But what do you as these 4 weeks get ready to unfold? Anything that you're focused on, or anything that you're anxious to see once camp actually does start?
Well, the health of Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
In addition to where Josh Jacobs, what he's going to be doing, that I think is the other kind of key storyline for this offense is where is he going to be at health-wise, and then if he's healthy, how quickly does he develop a rapport? How quickly can this offense get in sync? You would think, again, the familiarity with Josh McDaniels expedites that process a little bit. He's not going into a brand-new situation, but is the foot going to hold up? Will it hold up?
Yeah.
What's the quarterback situation going to look like? From everything we've seen, heard, shouldn't be necessarily a problem. Is that posturing? I don't know.
Yeah.
We're going to find out. But if the offense is intact, if Josh Jacobs is back there, if Jimmy Garoppolo stays healthy, you have, like we talked about, Vinny, you have the makings of an offense that I think is going to be able to score some points regardless of how young this defense is.
I think it was the great George Clinton who said, feet don't fail me now.
Yeah.
I think Jimmy's looking at that foot and says, his foot don't fail me now, because to your point, he's played on some explosive 49er teams without question. But a lot of those 49er teams also were more defensive driven, kind of, managing it offensively. I would be hard pressed to say that he has played with an offense that has more tools than he's going to have with the Raiders, with Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow, who I thought looked good in OTAs and might be a sneaky pick to have one of those kind of comeback years. I know that he wouldn't win that award, but I think that people might be sleeping a little bit on Hunter Renfrow right now. You throw in Jacoby Myers, you throw in DeAndre Carter, who I thought looked explosive during OTAs and minicamp. Michael Mayer when he gets on the field. Austin Hooper. Josh Jacobs when he gets out there. There's a lot to like if you're a quarterback on this team.
I think so too. And again, for the style, not that Jimmy Garoppolo can't throw the ball deep. I'm not saying that, but we know he's at his best getting the ball out quickly, distributing it over the middle, the tight ends and whatnot. There's going to be players that he's going to be able to get the ball to and with quick decisions and whatnot. And then you have Devontae Adams, of course, who does everything. He can still do everything. Of course, he wants the ball deep down the field, but he's really good after the catch. He's really good with short stuff too. And there's a lot of, I think, playmakers for Garoppolo to distribute the ball to, provided he's healthy. So with that being said, it all comes down to, like, feet don't fail me now. Yeah. This is a huge, not only inflection point, I think, for the Raiders, but obviously for Jimmy Garoppolo in his NFL career. He's still only 31, despite, I think, everything that he's been through at this point. Of course, he wants to keep playing ball. So we got to see how that finishes out.
I've been watching a lot of footage of Jimmy going back to his New England days. He can throw the ball long. Yeah. I sometimes wonder if he was, and even with the 49ers where he wasn't necessarily asked to do that, there's a lot of video proof that he can throw it downfield. Sure. And I think that, to your point, the weapons and how they're going to be utilized this year is, and especially when you're talking about the run game, could lead to taking shots downfield. Like if you're a defense and you gotta worry about Josh Jacobs, and if you're a defense and you have to obviously account for a Hunter Renfrow and some of the things that we saw them doing during OTAs underneath, where if you're successfully executing those types of plays, inevitably defenses are going to start creeping up a little bit, trying to take that away, and that's where the downfield might open up a little bit, and there's plenty of evidence that he can make those types of throws.
And he wasn't playing with again, very good offense in San Francisco, but the skill sets of the personnel was a little different, right? Davante Adams is one of the best deep receivers in the league. As great as Deebo Samuel is, he's so much better at a number of other things than necessarily going deep. So I think it's going to look a little different too because of the personnel, because you have Davante Adams and he gets open in different ways.
Right, absolutely. All right, that's going to do it for this week. We're counting the days here, just like you guys are. But in a couple of weeks, we'll be turning that calendar, and it will be July, and the Raiders are expected to start training camp sometime in July, at the end of July. So we could literally say, starting in a couple of weeks, the NFL season starts this month. So can't wait for that. We're going to be here with you guys every step of the way. Don't worry about that. We want to thank you. I know Sam feels the same way, for all the support, all the listenership, all the readership, whether you're looking at Vegas Nation for the videos or the great content, or anything that we do, columns, everything. It's a one-stop shop, right? For Raider coverage. And when you talk about the Las Vegas Review Journal in particular, all the sports here in Las Vegas, which is going to be added to here pretty soon, and we're anxious and excited about all that. Until next week, thank you to all of the listeners. Thank you to Larry Muir, our great producer, and thank you to Station Casinos, STN Sports, Blue Wire, and Las Vegas Review.